Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to another episode of Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comic podcast. We're looking again at G.I. Joe Disavowed ARAH, and today's deep dive will be into issue 5 from 2002, as well as the Battlefiles tie-ins. Stick around for my quiz, Devil's True or Devil's Poo. We'll have some toy talk, some G.I. Joe merchandise, and the segment that everyone is talking about, I imagine, Innuen-Joe. And without any further ado, time to introduce the co-hosts. First up, it's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Mark.
Hi, good to have you here. And rounding out our Disavowed crew, it's G.I. Jay Cordray.
Hi, Joe fans.
Good to have you back, Jay.
Good to be back.
And has any excitement been happening to you guys this week?
Oh, goodness. Well, as I told you guys, I bought a new computer, so I've been working on updating that and making sure everything's good to go for the show. None of that is as exciting as the news that we're getting Snake Eyes versus Batman. I think we're all excited about that.
Oh, yeah.
Or not. Yeah, we're still keeping our ears out for word of what the Amazon Lady J show is going to be. I should be getting Snake Supreme Cobra Commander today sometime. And Last Laugh hardcover, which is the IDW Chuckles storyline.
Cobra thing.
And another action figure guide. So today's a big Joe day for me.
But we should probably spend a minute talking about the Batman Fortnite announcement.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess that's it. It's not specifically Batman Snake Eyes, is it? It's Batman Fortnite.
Yeah, it's a Fortnite comic, isn't it? So
I know nothing about Fortnite.
So I'm told, and all of our listeners who are gamers can be aghast at how out of touch I am, that Fortnite started as a building game, and then it became, I guess, a fighting game or an action game, and you can design your own character. That's the appeal. And when Hasbro announced that Snake Eyes was a downloadable character, I can't even remember if it was a couple weeks or a couple months back. It's not the character, it's the skin. So you can look like Snake Eyes and sort of play as Snake Eyes, but you don't meet Snake Eyes, and there's no Snake Eyes story.
It's the sort of the big thing of Fortnite is all about sort of the skins and the dances, emotes, and I guess that you can download and then sort of have your character look different and sort of have these, I guess, dances and things. And yeah, the Fortnite aficionados are happy to pay fairly substantial amounts of money to have a skin so that your character can look different or do a slightly different dance. And so the Fortnite team is constantly releasing new characters that can be downloaded and be sort of plugged into the game as their big revenue stream.
So I'm curious what the crossover will be. Will that actually be, will that be the Snake Eyes character, do you think, or will it just be somebody in a Snake Eyes costume?
That's a good point. We could also take a step back and put this in context. So I think 2 months ago, Marvel Comics announced a series of variant covers for the regular Marvel Comics superhero line, where some Fortnite characters would be appearing on the cover, of Iron Man or Avengers, along with Marvel characters. I saw that and I thought, oh, I wonder if this is a prelude to Marvel publishing an actual story crossover, like a discrete miniseries. And then to my surprise, just a few weeks, or maybe it was a month or two ago, DC Comics announced a Batman Fortnite crossover, co-written by Christos Gage, who co-wrote Cobra for IDW. And I think his co-writer is one of the developers of the Fortnite game.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, one of the big Fortnite. Big wigs.
And I actually wasn't following the news any further. I thought it was a one-shot, and then to my surprise, just this past week, as a comics retailer, as someone who owns a store, I get 2 or 3 emails every week from DC with news. What that means nowadays is just announcements of upcoming variant covers or release date changes. And the news was something about issues 2 and 3 of Batman Fortnite. And I thought, oh, okay, I guess it's a miniseries. I guess it's 6 issues. And oh, by the way, Snake Eyes is in issue 3, and the solicit for issue 3, the actual summary that's in all the official catalogs and websites, is Batman versus Snake Eyes, period. That's it. Like, that's the only thing we're putting in this solicitation. And then there's the regular cover with Batman in the foreground and Snake Eyes, sword drawn, sort of falling, landing, popping up behind him.
Yeah, and I guess at this point we don't know for sure whether the extent of that Fortnite appearance from Snake Eyes, because this is, I guess, called Batman Fortnite 0 Point, the actual series. So it's probably first and foremost a Fortnite centric comic, then a Batman one, and this Snake Eyes appearance is part of that. So is it going to be just a cover variant, or is it going to be just a panel, or are we going to actually see a full issue with proper story and interaction, like a full comics worth of crossover with Batman?
Jay, how do you feel about the Jim Lee variant cover?
It's good. I mean, it's Jim Lee. I love Jim Lee. I had to look at some of his Uncanny X-Men stuff. I thought that was really his best work. If you compare the Jim Lee variant with like Uncanny X-Men 277, where you have Wolverine and Gambit fighting, I think that the 277 is a much more dynamic image. I would have liked to have seen something like that. Probably with this, his intention was to try to show more of the full body, get more of the costumes in the picture. Whereas the Uncanny 277, they both were kind of in their yellow and blue outfits. But I think that resulted in a better cover. I'm wondering is there any kind of Fortnite story? Like, what if Batman's not Batman? What if it's just a Batman skin versus a Snake Eyes skin?
Yeah, I'd say the Batman, certainly on the front, on the Jim Lee one, is got a different look to him. So he's got one of his modern redesigns, which has got a kind of off-kilter, sort of hand-drawn bat signal, looking like, I don't know if that's future state Batman or what, but not the typical Batman that look that I'm quite used to.
Do you guys like the Jim Lee variant?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, any attention that you get to Snake Eyes with a big name artist like Jim Lee and get people excited about Snake Eyes and G.I. Joe is probably a good thing from my perspective.
We got Dead Game.
I'm torn on this because similarly, anytime, we've never seen Jim Lee draw Snake Eyes in any kind of official capacity, and I don't know if I've even seen a convention sketch sort of pop up here or there. And I've always wanted G.I. Joe to return to the cachet of getting an artist like Jim Lee to do a variant cover, a regular cover, maybe even a whole story. And yes, I'm on the record about Rob Liefeld getting a whole Snake Eyes miniseries being exciting. this is such a strange convergence. This is so many levels removed from just an actual G.I. Joe story, like a G.I. Joe comic book, that I don't feel like I'm being punked, but it's just a head scratcher. Because Snake Eyes has the cultural cachet that I feel like IDW and DC by now could have arranged a 6-issue crossover miniseries that's just Batman G.I. Joe or Batman Snake Eyes, and for this to be a sort of sideways guest appearance in someone else's book. But it makes sense because Snake Eyes is this downloadable skin in this game. And we forgot to mention, this, at the same time that the downloadable skin was announced, Hasbro announced a special 6-inch Snake Eyes Fortnite crossover action figure that you could buy. And I think it's only a Hasbro exclusive.
Yeah, so it's the G.I. Joe classified Snake Eyes that was previously re-released, but with some fine tuning to make it match the Fortnite version of the character.
It's got some different paint apps and some. There's actually a couple really nice guns that come with that figure, but then you have like a launchable plunger or something, which for me that was like the thing that just immediately took me out of it. I'm like, no, I draw the line at Joes with plungers. No,
you don't
Janet or
use...
Viper. Sorry.
So
you don't have to use the plunger. But that's important.
You don't have to.
This toy comes in a fancy box. So the comparison for me is the new Avengers Transformers 4-issue miniseries that Marvel and IDW published.
I remember that.
Like 10 years ago. And I didn't really like it. There's not... on a certain scale, like, I don't know what Luke Cage and like Spider-Woman are going to do when like Megatron is walking in front of them. And yes, like a good writer can make this work and can pull off sort of the power sets, the difference in scale. But I'm not sure. It's like the Batman Ninja Turtles crossovers. They're a lot of fun. I don't know what they get you besides sort of scratching a fan itch. It's like, oh, well, now we can have a scene where Batman and Donatello talk because they're both gadget people. Now we can have a scene where Batman and Leonardo talk because Leonardo has swords and he's the leader and Batman is a leader. But Batman's also got an attitude, so he can have a moment with Raphael, or, we can have the Joker say something crazy to Shredder. Like, it's... I don't know how satisfying a story like this is because you can't really change anything permanently. So you sort of, I assume it's like paint by numbers. Like, okay, well, they're going to fight, they cross dimensions, they meet up, they're going to fight, they decide they can't fight. And then the villains team up and the good guys have to take down the villains. And so you just have these sort of fun matchups like, Shredder and the Joker, or Ra's al Ghul.
It's not going to be Stormwatch aliens.
There's few and far between sort of crossovers that are, satisfying and advance the story forward, like Stormwatch aliens. I think the ones that you're kind of the more common occurrence are ones that are maybe bad or mediocre, like Green Lantern or versus Predator, or I think it might have even been Justice League versus Predator, and even the
Bad
Marvel
Rock
versus
Spider-Man.
Yeah, or even the Marvel versus DC, the massive crossover at its time, where they tried to fit everything in, and it just meant that there was no space for any single thing that was satisfying, because it would be a panel of Lobo versus Wolverine, and a panel of Storm versus Wonder Woman. And it was just a bit of fanboy service rather than anything that was, very satisfying. The sort of the amalgam universe where they were able to spotlight solo mashed up characters was a little bit more interesting because of it's a chance to just look at one individual character and have some quite interesting creative teams on them as well.
This is, to me, I don't know how far back Hasbro was planning on this, but to me, this is one more stop along the way to a live action Snake Eyes movie. That you have a rollout of merchandise, convention appearances, news and toys to raise awareness and excite your audience. And you know, anything that's going to help that Snake Eyes movie, I'm all for. I will buy this comic, and I don't think I was going to make it to issue 3 otherwise. But you know, this isn't how I saw these two worlds colliding.
Yeah, a very good point. Yeah, all about that brand awareness. I hadn't thought of that. That's yeah, very on point. Okay, so that is Snake Eyes and Batman talked about. And before we run out of time for the rest of the show, shall we get on to talking about Devil's Due issue 5?
Yes, let's do.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read. Okay,
so this is G.I. Joe issue 5 from 2002. We've got story and layouts from Josh Blaylock, pencils from Eric Wolf-Hansen, inks John Larter and Barbara Schultz, colors Hi-Fi Designs, letters Dreamer Designs, military consultants SFC Brian Savage Peterson, graphic design from Mike Norton, and edit Scott Whirl.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
So the main cover is Duke Falling by Steve Kurth there. What do you guys think?
When the image was revealed, either at the end of issue 4 or in the catalogs way back when, I immediately thought of John Byrne's cover for the original G.I. Joe issue 20, where Clutch is falling away from us. And I thought, oh no, a cover swipe. You shouldn't resort to a cover swipe in your 5th issue. It's actually a different pose. It's the same idea. It's a really exciting image that Steve Kurth pulls off. The coloring is a little bit much for me because there are highlights on the guns, and there's a highlight on his belt buckle. I think his expression is somewhere between sort of silly and dramatic. But you know, there's some great foreground stuff as this rope, this cord that he's attached to. As it gets close to us, close to the camera in the upper left corner, the ink line gets really thick, and there's some roof tiles that are at the top of the image that are out of focus. I don't love this effect where a colorist will blur something in the ink art to make it look like it's moving fast. I feel like that works very well. I think that's an artificial. That's an artificial layering, and I think the artist should have drawn it somehow blurred or with speed lines. It's sort of treating comic book art, which is flat, like live action in film with a camera lens. But it gets the job done, and we get the sense that he's falling and these pieces of roof are falling too.
Yeah, these slates. Yeah, I think I saw a recent tweet from one of the people involved. It might have been Steve Kurth or perhaps the inker John Larter, that they were not satisfied with that blurred effect and would have rather it would have been left alone. But yeah, I think I was impressed at the time, and I think it's a strong image and different from your regular, you know, character standing looking tough pointing the gun, or you know, something along those lines. There's a lot of energy and action and interesting perspective, as you say. It's a hard one to carry off. Not an easy composition for an artist to necessarily approach.
I like this cover. I think it's got a nice perspective. You know, just look at the people on the street below Duke. There's, you know, everybody looks to be in proper perspective. Your buildings and everything look really good. The angle's really good. The face is, yeah, you know, it's not great, but Kurt's getting there, and we've definitely picked that apart enough as far as his faces and stuff go. The outfit, that Duke has on is good. His shadowing and everything is really good. I was just looking at this now thinking this might be one of those instances where I think Chris always had a problem that this doesn't exactly happen in the issue.
Mm-hmm.
There is a scene where he jumps out of a window in Russia, but never quite falls out of a building window in Italy, which is where this looks like it is. But, you see this on the stands, it's going to grab your eye and hopefully get people to buy it.
I want him to be in his normal costume. And I understand that
I agree.
The interior demands that he be in a tuxedo or his black spy suit, and that the cover can reflect that more accurately. But as I'll say in a few minutes, I don't love that he's never in his normal G.I. Joe outfit in the issue, even if the story demands that. And where the cover is going to be an exaggeration of the issue, right? If this is for lapsed G.I. Joe fans, like, oh, there hasn't been a G.I. Joe comic on the stands in 7 years. Hey, what's this G.I. Joe number 5? Who's this random blonde guy falling in some black suit? Is that Snake Eyes? Because didn't Snake Eyes have blonde hair? Did they fix his face?
You're right. At the end of the last issue, he was, just a plain black suit and a blonde hair. This totally could be Snake Eyes if you didn't know any better.
So from a branding perspective, this cover doesn't work. From a drawing perspective, it's great.
Very good point. And the outfit being worn sort of is a good segue into the back cover. We've got David Michael Beck again on the back covers, this time spotlighting Duke. So it's an image of him in the foreground in his new combat togs with a burning tank in the background. What do you guys think?
It's okay.
I quite like a lot of the picture, but overall it doesn't really connect. I think his face looks a bit strange, to be honest, and I think that lets down the rest of the composition.
Some of the surfaces, and we see this a lot on his covers for the Battlefiles books that we'll talk about here in a little bit, the surfaces on uniforms and things look kind of flat. I'm thinking particularly of Firefly on issue number 2. His vest, it looks like a line drawing that was painted. There's not a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not texture, but just it doesn't look real solid, I guess.
Yeah.
Beck does well with color and
Yes.
light. His color and his light are stronger than his anatomy. Many of his compositions are bold and striking, and I wonder if he is better served by fantasy art, where if he's painting a cave or a dragon, something that we don't have as much reference to compare it to, where his style is sort of stronger than the accuracy of an actual piece of clothing or texture on skin. I wonder if he's better served when stuff is less realistic. Some of Duke's anatomy, like his face on this cover, like his hair doesn't quite center on his forehead.
Or Scanner's hair, it looks more like kind of a replication of hair in much the way that the big G.I. Joe figures would have their real lifelike hair. Sort of seems to be closer to that than what you might expect to be on a human head.
Lifelike hair.
Is this an actual Duke action figure costume? Does this correspond to an action figure from about 2002?
I think this is taking the same inspiration as the Duke that we saw in issue 4, the new sort of toy design.
Okay.
It's not completely faithful to it, but I think it's taking that as its jumping off point.
I'm seeing a lot of shoulder pads, sort of small shoulder pads and shoulder like armor plating in these Devil's Due issues, like Major Blood's costume. And one of the points that I'll make with the Battlefiles is that Devil's Due has to contend with some of the then new G.I. Joe toy designs, which are inconsistent. I look at this costume and it on the David Michael Beck back cover, and it reminds me of Sergeant Savage, not the Sergeant Savage figure from the Sergeant Savage line, but the Sergeant Savage figure from the G.I. Joe Extreme line. But that's just me, because I'm often thinking about G.I. Joe Extreme. Shall we talk about the innards?
Let's do it. Let's find out what happened on the inside with a plot breakdown. Take it away, Jay.
Following the dissolution of the Cobra organization, Major Sebastian Blood was captured and detained at Fort Leavenworth Prison. 2 years after his imprisonment, Blood incited a riot and escaped in the confusion. Former First Sergeant of the G.I. Joe team, Conrad Hauser, codenamed Duke, is now working for an elite Black Ops division of the U.S. government. He has been tasked with bringing Blood to justice for the murder of the G.I. Joe team original commander, General Lawrence Flagg. Infiltrating a high society gathering in the former Soviet Union, Duke finds information that places Blood in Italy. After double-crossing both his associates and buyers in an arms deal, Blood dons his familiar costume and notifies his commander that he'll rendezvous with him in Rome. However, while making his escape in a speedboat, Blood is soon tailed by 3 men on jet skis. Blood loses 2 of the men but is attacked by the third, Duke. A high-speed chase ensues with Blood in a stolen car and Duke on a borrowed motorcycle. Catching up to Blood, Duke plants an explosive device on the side of Blood's car. Blood leaps out of the car at the last minute as it careens over a hillside, bursting into flames. Duke tells Blood there's no escape, but Blood follows the car over the cliff and into the sea. Later, during a search of Blood's hideout, Duke finds information pointing to the return of the original Cobra commander.
Which leads us into G.I. Joe issue 1. So a one and done flashback issue here set immediately before the events of G.I. Joe, focusing in really on just 2 main characters, Duke and Major Blood. Where do we want? And we've also got a new artist as well, a guest artist, Eric Wolf Hansen. So should we start there? I think he did quite a solid job. Certainly didn't sort of let the side down too much.
I think the art is pretty good in this. In a lot of places, it looks a lot like Gary Frank, and Frank is a really capable artist. He started out, I think, first came to my attention after Dale Keown on The Incredible Hulk, and it was kind of a mix between Keown and Davis, and at the time it was a little bit of getting used to, but very capable artist, and I think our artist here is pretty good. It's a little more subdued, I think, than what we had in the first arc, and it doesn't try to be near as splashy or highly detailed oriented, and that works a lot better for this kind of a property.
Yeah, a little bit sort of probably slightly less splashy, slightly less stylized. Probably hard to point to this style of art out of a lineup and immediately say who the artist was, for example. But quite solid storytelling through the story for the most part, and some interesting elements of the story that sort of sell quite well as it's coming along. I'm thinking of, for example, a sequence where he's dragging a computer hard drive, attached to a device from his wrist, and then putting his foot up to stop it. It's very sort of filmatic and possibly quite a difficult sequence to properly sell on the page, but works and works well and is easily understood what they're trying to actually achieve.
But that credit also goes to Josh Blaylock, who provided layouts for this issue.
That's true.
My thoughts on Hansen, I wish he had drawn issues 1 through 4, because he's not overdrawing. Kurth did get better across the 4 issues, and got better 10 years later when he did more G.I. Joe. But the first 4 issues are so busy, and the art is trying to be a little hot, like modern hot, cool, like sunglasses cool. And Hansen, I think, is satisfied with more just telling the story.
Right.
I think
more focused on storytelling.
I think his everyone he draws is a tiny bit cute in their faces. There's a softness to how he draws heads, faces, and eyes. The eyes are a little big. I think that runs counter to the tone of the story, which is a high tension, exciting spy mission with an action movie tacked on at the end. So I think if I really squint, I don't think he's quite the right artist for this issue. But in terms of drawing everything to be clear, he can pull off action. There's some good acting where someone makes a face or someone has an expression change. And I was surprised in sort of Googling him that his trail in comics is so short. And sort of the main other thing that comes up in my very limited Googling is the Micronauts miniseries that he drew for Devil's Due.
Interesting. Okay.
Did you guys read Velvet?
I read the first 2 issues.
Some of it.
Could you imagine Steve Epting drawing this?
I can imagine Steve Epting drawing every G.I. Joe story ever.
That would be beautiful. Velvet was just phenomenal. And that's what a lot of what this issue, I think, it really worked for me, this issue, in a lot of ways. You know, you had a lot of James Bond elements, and that's a lot of like what Velvet is with the spy stuff. And, your settings are like that. And this works, I just think with a little more, especially with a more accomplished artist like Epting right now, it could be a phenomenal book.
Yeah, I mean the art aside and the look of it, though, the concept of Duke as James Bond, I don't know if that as a concept really feels like G.I. Joe, and as competent as the art and the issue generally might be. Is it, in inverted commas, G.I. Joe? I'm not entirely sure. I thought the look of G.I. Joe... I thought the look of Duke was a little bit similar, actually, to Steve Rogers when he was in the Steve Rogers Super Soldier book from Ed Brubaker, I think it was, when he's back from the dead, but Bucky Barnes is wielding the shield, and so he's sort of having a new guise as more of a sort of Captain America super spy. Similar look in terms of all-American, blonde, square-jawed with a kind of super suit, not too far away from Duke's black look here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could just swap the dialogue, and this would be, this could easily be in that same time period.
I think Mark makes a good point. It's not really a G.I. Joe comic. If this had been a year later in the Devil's Due run and had been a one-shot or a special, they did those special missions specials later on, as an issue of the regular G.I. Joe series, so soon after the miniseries, I can imagine this losing some people who had come back. I mean, it's an exciting comic, and there's some closure at the end because the mission's not successful because Blood gets away, but it sort of loops you back to the beginning of issue 1. And if you've just read the miniseries, then you now have this additional story level for the miniseries. But it's not a military story; it's a spy story. Duke's never in costume. No other Joes show up, I don't think this was the right issue to follow up the miniseries, even if they needed a single issue drawn by someone else that filled in some story and also gave them a month to catch up with their regular artist for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I'm entirely sure that is the reason that they took this approach, that they wanted to give Steve Kurth a month or 2 months breathing room to get ahead on the main series, and possibly even the writer give them a bit of breathing room to think, good grief, what's going, we had a 4-issue arc plotted out and I used up my biggest ideas. What next? Potentially. But yeah, I think it was certainly to create a stopgap so they could build up a bit, get going with the issue 6 and beyond.
I wonder if this was in their plan, because we know that they originally Reinstated was supposed to be a 4-issue miniseries. Did they think, okay, well, we do the 4 issues. If that sells well, then we'll jump into the second arc, which would be, I don't know for sure how far that goes, but number 6 and beyond. And then they were given the green light to do 5, and they thought, we need to put something in here, or where this originally would have fit into their plan.
I think it's the combination of what the two of you were saying. It's a stopgap, but it also fills in some story. But again, like I'm not convinced. Even in the reinstated arc, I'm not convinced that Duke is now a spy, that he's now in intelligence. I think Duke or other Joes should and would have done other things after the team is disbanded, but most of them stayed in the military. I just want a military story. It can still be, spy-ish, but it should be military adjacent, and this is not. And part of what throws me about this issue, I don't think this issue is internally consistent, because Duke talks to himself, but what he's really doing is he's talking to the reader in a cute way that is distracting. So, I was an Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, and I had seen some of his movies, and when he made Last Action Hero, this was now like a big step towards a larger audience, because it's PG-13 and it's wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, the movie knows it's a movie because it's about like movies as a construct. And so on page 2, Duke's talking to someone. He says, for some reason, out of all the Cobra big shots I encountered in my day, I really couldn't stand that guy. I don't know who he's talking to. I guess he's talking to himself, but he says, but then across the fuselage of this cargo plane, there's someone else who's telling him it's time to parachute. But I can't imagine he's talking to that guy, because that guy's not important in the scene. And then the thing that really throws me is on page 6, where he's tapped into the computer. He snuck away from this party. He's tapped into this computer, and he's transferring data to his fancy wrist computer. And 2 thugs discover him. And he starts to make an excuse. He's like pulling at his collar, and he says, guys, it's not what it looks. I don't have time for this. And then there's this panel. It's like the bottom third of the page. It's a partial splash. And he takes his tuxedo off to reveal his cool spy outfit beneath it, and to show that he's got 2 pistols. I appreciate that it shows that he has 2 pistols, because in the next panel, he's holding the 2 pistols. So we're keeping track of his armament. But it's a silent panel, and this drawing is just to make this page cool, and it's just to make this piece of art sell better. But, like, actually unbuttoning your tuxedo and taking your jacket off, it takes like 40 seconds. And if you are sneaking around a bad guy's mansion and you're stealing something, you're not going to do that. And it's this thing that characters do in movies and TV shows, where they say something that's funny or cool for the benefit of the audience, but that no one would actually say or do in the scene, because you just get shot.
Well, he has experience ripping clothes off, right? Wasn't he in that Magic Mike movie where they were strippers and they just ripped the clothes off?
Ha.
Okay.
Oh, I'm thinking of Channing Tatum, not actually Duke. Sorry.
You see this tone problem where it's like, I'm not worried that he might get shot by Major Blood. I'm not worried that Major Blood's going to get away, because Duke he's sort of cracking jokes as he does this. And I don't mind if Blaylock decides that Duke should now have a sense of humor, but like, you would just pull your gun out of your tuxedo and shoot those guys. You wouldn't, like, for the coolness of the reader who really wants to see Duke's cool costume, take a moment to take off your tuxedo. That's dumb.
Yeah. There's no reason for him to do that.
Not only is he wasting time taking off that tuxedo and showing his enemies as plays out in the scene, his cool new look, and then sort of having to then sort of unpick his outfit, take the things off the arms to then get to his guns all the time that they could be raising the alarm or be shooting at him. It's entirely nonsensical. And a similar thing actually happens later on in the book, which is that Major Blood has just done something and exploded a building and is making a getaway on a speedboat. But before he does that, he takes the time to make a costume change out of his suit and into his armor, which that is not conducive for a quick, speedy getaway. And you're not only and this was the point actually I was going to make about Duke. What is that? Not only is he blowing his cover by taking off his tux and meaning that he can't then go back through the party in his disguise, but he's also just wasting a ridiculous amount of time to do so. From a actual story perspective, it makes no sense at all.
Let me make a quick criticism about the art. I for the most part, like I said, I like it. I think it works better than Kurth did in issues 1 through 4. But this page that we're looking at right now, with Duke revealing his super spy suit, the panel right above that where he's starting to take the suit off, that face is like, wow, with the big grin and the big huge eyes. I was just like, what kind of crazy face is he making there? And then we see the same thing later on, kind of where Blood is about to double cross his associates, and he's got just a really super big grin on his face. Those are a little too much for me.
Going back to this thread of critiquing Eric Wolf Hansen's art, sometimes in comics, I see in a comics artist what I think is someone who learned to draw comics by looking at comics. And certainly that's how a lot of people learn to draw comics, right? All the people at Marvel,
good point.
All the people at Marvel in the 70s and 80s were just swiping Kirby and Gil Kane and Romita. And the editors were encouraging them to do that. But when I look at all of these faces and some of the full bodies, some of the full bodies are a little short, a little stubby. Some of the faces, the actual eyes, nose, and mouth feel a little off axis to the center of the skull. I see an artist who I think learned to draw comics more from looking at comics than from looking at real life. Like going outside and drawing trees, drawing people, figure drawing, that kind of thing. So everything's convincing. Hands, perspective, tech, equipment, motorcycles. But when you really zero in on sort of anatomy and faces and sort of how someone stands when they're behind a computer, how someone stands when they're nervously tugging their collar, a lot of it's a little off.
Yeah, that goes back to what I said about Steve Epting on Velvet. I mean, you look at that, and there's so much in there that probably he used photo reference for. And I remember for a long time there was kind of a feeling that, oh, you shouldn't use photo reference. We don't want it to look like real life. I have never agreed with that. I think that the closer it looks to real life, I mean, you don't want it to be static, but you look at something like Velvet and it looks like a movie. And again, I think if we had something more along those lines with this issue would work a lot better.
That comparison, again, I'd love to see Epting draw some G.I. Joe. Epting's been drawing comics for 30 years.
Yeah.
And this might be, Hansen's, third month in comics.
And I didn't like a lot of Epting's earlier stuff. His run on the Avengers in the 90s, I did not like at all.
There's something else in the story which throws me off a little bit. And that is that there are some characters that show up, and I don't know if we're supposed to know who they are or not. So the other guy on this cargo plane who says to Duke, it's time to jump out of the plane and parachute. When Duke jumps out the window to get away from the mansion when he's been discovered, a helicopter picks him up, and there's someone in the helicopter who's manning the door gun, who's covering Duke while Duke climbs up the ladder. And that guy has 2 lines of dialogue, but he's all in black and he has red night vision goggles. And then similarly, during this speedboat chase where 2 or 3, it's a little hard for me to follow, guys are chasing Major Blood, one of them has a sword strapped to his back. And I don't know if that's Blaylock or Hansen sort of casually, accidentally just putting cool gear on someone. But I'm led to believe that this team, this intelligence squad that Duke is now a part of, is decidedly not G.I. Joe. If you put a person in all black chasing Major Blood and you give them a sword, I'm going to assume that's Snake Eyes. And I didn't like stop cold in my tracks when reading this comic and say, Snake Eyes, great. But it did stop me, and I thought, who is this? Am I supposed to know who this is? Am I going to know who this is when I turn the page? And that person like gets thrown off their speedboat and falls in the river, and they don't show up again. So this issue asks a few questions that it doesn't answer, and that I don't think it intended to answer, and that throws me off.
I think I'd speculate on that character with the sword on their back. Your initial assumption might be must be Snake Eyes. In black, got a sword on his back, but he's someone who's talking. So okay, that can't be Snake Eyes. Then there's the redesign of the Jinx costume, where she's got this kind of black gimp suit going on, but this is someone with a sort of a male musculature. So okay, it can't be Jinx, although she's in a very similar suit with a ninja. So okay, that's a bit confusing, but no. And just sort of in the course of this discussion, what it's made me think who that might supposed to be is Kamakura, because it alludes to Duke kind of having some ties to Snake Eyes, and Kamakura doing some sort of sneaky work for him at the very beginning of issue 1. So possibly that might make some degree of sense, even if it's
I remember that.
only very lightly alluded to here.
I think that as exciting and competent, I don't mean to damn by faint praise. This issue is more than competent. This issue is good. I think as competent as Blaylock is running this company, writing and laying out this issue, that Scott Worrell is editing it, and I don't know to what extent he's actually editing story versus sort of like controlling the art and the story and the letters and the color, like being the person who packages it. This issue to me, and to some extent the previous issues, reveal a small young company that's not quite ready to take on this task. I feel like an editor who's got more time or breathing room, or a brand manager who's sort of with this fine-tooth comb that we can do from the safety of 2020 hindsight, like, no, that needs to be explained. Why does that guy have a sword? Or if it's Kamakura, someone needs to name him, or in the next issue we need to immediately and concretely refer back to this. Again, sort of these questions that are getting asked that either don't have answers or no one is telling me when I'm going to get the answers. I feel like this just needs to be a little bit more cohesively managed.
Yeah, they're not quite there yet.
Okay. Let's move on maybe to some fashion talk.
Armani, Prada, Versace too. Joe's changed their outfits from black to blue. Duke and Hawk, look but don't gawk. Changing their kit, whoa, is that legit? Swapping camo jackets, headgear and boots. It's now neon colours and funky spacesuits. Sci-fi stalker and even roadblock. While Bill, Flint and Mutt gave me a shock. So go take a walk if clothes aren't your passion. Cause it's comic book talk and lovely G.I. Joe fashion.
So I think we've probably talked a little bit about Duke's spy suit to death now, so let's maybe just touch on Major Blood's look. What do you think of that as an update to his kind of classic look? The sort of the green colours combo up and down his arms. He's got armour not too far away from what he had before. He's got a couple of grey turtle shells on either shoulder there.
Yeah.
What strikes me the most is probably that helmet that I think they've tried to go for a slightly more tangible, real world look to it. That he's got these hints of maybe some padding inside the helmet that might make it work as a real world helmet and sitting on his head. Even if I don't think it probably doesn't stay on for too long. I think it does fall off in a couple of places. Unfortunately, he loses his classic rocket glove. Sort of robot arm, as some people might call it. They sort of the armored glove that his V1 figure has got. And he doesn't have those dog tags around his neck any longer, so possibly losing some of the more interesting elements of his original costume.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan of this this outfit for Major Blood. I didn't like it in the first arc. I think, like you said, there's some elements of the original outfit that are there, but it's just not hitting it the way that the original iconic version did. That rocket arm, like you said, was a huge part of the look of the character. It was a great design initially. If you're not going to do something that really stands out, then I don't feel like that needed to be messed with at all. This, I don't know. I mean, this outfit just doesn't do anything for me.
There's a trend in a lot of design over the last 20, 30 years. Movie design, comic book design, toy design, to more detail. Like all the current Transformers for the War for Cybertron, right? Rather than like a smooth cube for a shoulder, they've got lots of small raised bits and little grooves. Brian Hitch drawing the Ultimates, which clearly was an influence on this book, as it was on lots of comics in the early 2000s. That ribbing on pants and gloves and elbow pads is going to be sort of realistic, that people aren't wearing just cloth pants or spandex, that they're wearing actual sort of athletic or like rock climbing clothing. Hollywood movie design, just think of like the live action Green Lantern movie where like, the costume is sort of this organic thing rather than just being a smooth thing. And design in general for me sort of hits a sweet spot when it's a little simpler or closer to the middle. As much as exciting as Brian Hitch's work on the Ultimates was, because it was so realistic, these drawings, these costumes, when it carries over to something like G.I. Joe, it doesn't always mean better. So, Duke's costume here, he's got he's got elbow pads and the straps around his elbows, and he's got the little wrist ribbing for his gloves. And then similarly, Major Blood has all this extra stuff on him. And if you look at the outside of his helmet, there are all these additional grooves and contours that remind me of the movie Cobra Commander helmet from G.I. Joe Retaliation, as compared to the animated Cobra Commander helmet from the 1980s. And all that stuff is just harder to draw, I think of all these people who are drawing DC comics for the last 10 years, and when the New 52 showed up in 2011 and Jim Lee and 3 other people, but particularly Jim Lee, redesigned like all the DC costumes, just everyone now had so much additional stuff, like lines and little armor plates and those like hard knuckles for Batman to punch a bad guy in the face, and like knee pads shaped like the Batman logo, and like Superman had an S shield outline on his shoulders for no reason. More doesn't necessarily mean better. And there is an elegance in simplicity. And so if you have to make Major Blood's costume look more, quote, realistic, I like this because I think a lot of that stuff actually would be there. But for a comic book that's already fantastical, I don't need it.
Why do you think, Tim, I was just thinking about this as you were saying that, it didn't seem, when you read the Ultimates, at least it didn't seem to me like the seams on the costumes and the ribbing and that kind of thing, like any of that stuff was out of place or too much, but then you mentioned the New 52 designs. If you look at that, you look at the Superman costume, the Batman costume, and it's different somehow. Like you said, it just doesn't need that stuff. Do you think that's more because Hitch just has a general, more realistic style overall, as opposed to a lot of the other New 52 stuff, or why? And maybe it's just me, but I feel like it works better when Hitch does it than with the, like with this artist or with the New 52 redesigns.
This is a good question, and this is a good point, and I think I have half of a formed answer. Hitch integrates everything in a way that Jim Lee integrates everything. When we think of Jim Lee's X-Men, Jim Lee's Wildcats, Jim Lee's Justice League, it all works because it is all of a piece. We expect a high level of detail and bits and stuff on all these characters. When another artist draws like Zealot from Wildcats, when another artist draws Jim Lee's Superman redesign, it sticks out. When other artists try and draw the Brian Hitch Ultimates costumes, they may not work as well. And I think what's happening with Eric Wolf Hansen's art is very, very subtly the sort of level of detail that he's putting into the costumes is fighting the slightly cartooniness to his faces. And then also, because I'm always going to go back to color, the coloring is too busy. So the page where Duke jumps off his ski boat, jet ski, and punches Major Blood, there's just a lot going on this page, right? There's a lot going on in the inking. There are lots of highlights in the color that don't need to be there. The actual drawing is very energetic. And again, I think more simplicity in a lot of these, a little less penciling, a little less inking, a little less coloring, would be elegant. And this is an extreme example, but I was thinking of the 2 issues of Matt Fraction's Hawkeye that Brian Pulido drew at the beginning of that run, issues, I think it's 5 and 6. Pulido's drawing with this really flat graphical style that owes more to Steve Ditko than to like the sort of the Marvel House style of 2015. And I think a lot of G.I. Joe fans would be very upset if Brian Pulido drew an issue of G.I. Joe because his stuff is so flat and sort of boxy. I think his stuff is awesome. And I think, again, like the page where, the panel where Major Blood sticks his gun at a motorist because he's going to steal his car. I really like that panel because he's saying something, but he's really doing it. He's holding the, my Italian's not the best, but I'm going to assume this 45 will do the translating for me. And the motorist looks scared with his gun pointed at him, right? But they're also like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 highlights on the car because it's a shiny car in daylight.
Yeah, it's unnecessary. This was still early on, too, in the days of computer coloring, I think, where they had all these new tricks and they wanted to use them as much as they could. And I think maybe in the more recent years, they've kind of toned a lot of this stuff down. But, I mean, you look at a lot of comics from this era, and there are a lot of, like the panel that you just cited, the highlights on the car, it's just not needed. And a lot of that stuff, when they come back now and they recolor it, they tone a lot of that stuff down, and it looks a lot better.
Well, let's not get too far down a Hawkeye rabbit hole, because this is Talking Joe, not Talking Hawkeye. But while Tim was talking, I actually reached behind me and got my Hawkeye Volume 1, and I was just flicking through issues 4 and 5 by Javier Pulido, and there was some interesting parallels actually between those 2 issues and issue number 5 of G.I. Joe that we were reading, because we've got Hawkeye who's got his blonde crew cut, much like Duke. They're trying to sneak in and steal something. Hawkeye is launched through a window, and we have S.H.I.E.L.D. in their spy suits, including Nick Shield Jr. in his suits, the one that I was talking about that was similar to Duke's earlier, and there's some interesting connective tissue there. But my conclusion is that I probably would rather reread Hawkeye rather than this issue, to be honest.
And I apologize for getting Javier Pulido, who drew 2 issues of Hawkeye and some great, amazing Spider-Man issues, confused with Brian Pulido, who's the Lady Death guy. So, yes, I meant to say Javier Pulido. I'm sorry.
That's what I thought, and I was going to say that we should get Brian Pulido to do a Baroness one-shot.
Should we wrap up talking about this issue so we can get to Battlefiles?
Was there any I Spies before we wrap up?
Just one quick one. On page 15, when Duke is passing a bunch of motorists on a motorcycle, someone behind him is shaking his fist at him, saying, "Reckless American," but it's in quotations, which I don't understand.
No,
I wasn't sure about that.
Who is this man quoting?
I think they were meant to be using their pointy brackets to indicate that they're talking Italian rather than quoting that famous expression, "Reckless American." Yeah. The one I noticed was that they were leaning into some of Major Blood's file card details. So they were talking about him being from Australia, his Australian Special Air Service and Foreign Legion background, and that kind of thing.
The I Spy that I noticed was, again, the same page that you're talking about, where they're going into Blood's history. One of the lines that says, "Subject is qualified expert in all NATO and Warsaw Pact small arms." And if you read all the original file cards, that was on almost every Joe's original file card, that they were an expert in all NATO and Warsaw Pact small arms.
Indeed, yeah, and it is on his file card. Indeed, it says, yeah, qualified expert, all NATO and Warsaw Pact small arms.
Since I spent a minute frowning at the coloring in this comic, I will say on the third to last page, where the sunset is hitting Duke and these cops, and there are a lot of hard edges. Really, really nice. Good job, Hi-Fi.
High five, high five. I'm tempted to just skip past favourite line of dialogue. Unfortunately, Blaylock doesn't seem to have quite the same ear for interesting and memorable and notable dialogue that I'm used to seeing from Larry Hama. There wasn't anything that I particularly caught my eye here.
I like ugh, no, not the cord. And you referred to this scene. No, seriously. You referred to this scene at the beginning because this is a bit of really nice visual storytelling where Duke is downloading data from this CPU, and the computer is about to fall off the desk, and he's lying on his back behind it, dodging bullets, and he reaches his foot up to keep the computer from falling. And both as layouts and also as drawings, Blaylock and Hansen pull off a nice little story beat.
Yeah, I thought when that was mentioned earlier that as an artist, if you got that description on your page, it might be kind of tricky to figure out how to work that. So yeah, it was nice probably for Blaylock to actually do the layout for that, for Hansen to work from.
But I agree that Blaylock doesn't have the... I mean, again, it's sort of hitting... I don't want to hit over the head like Blaylock and Hama are different writers, and my loyalty is with the Marvel run of comics. But I would agree that there's nothing super snappy in the dialogue yet.
The one line of dialogue that I liked was just Duke from the beginning, where he says, "Out of all the Cobra big shots I encountered in my day, I really couldn't stand that guy." Which I thought, yeah, Blood always seemed like a real dirt bag. You know, out of a bunch of dirt bags, he was probably the biggest one.
Should we give this one a yo-joage? Using the chief kind of rule of thumb that anything above a 5 is not a regrettable read. I think I'm tempted to almost go lower, because if I was going to reread this collection again at some point soon in the future, I might skip past this issue, to be fair. So I think I'm going to go low. I might go 4.5 on it. It's not bad. It's just that I don't feel I would ever want to necessarily revisit this one.
I give this a 5 because as a self-contained issue, it's relatively satisfying, and it is better than the 4 previous issues.
Okay, I'm going to shock you guys. I agree with you both. It is better than the first 4. And considering that I gave them a 6.5, I'm going to have to give this one a 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
More Duke Spy comics for Jay.
I love spy comics. I really do. I mean, this one had its faults, but it was pretty good for what it was. You had the chase I really enjoyed. You know, they even threw in there the typical trope of running over a fruit cart and fruit going everywhere. You know, they had 2 or 3 different vehicles that they used. They were on speedboats and jet skis, and then Duke's on a motorcycle, Blood's in a car. It ends on a hillside. There was a lot to like about it, for me.
Yeah, and I get that it sort of is probably a better comic than the first four issues. The art is probably slightly stronger or clearer. The issues with the lettering that we've seen are largely improved. The pacing is much more straightforward. The story is easy to follow. So there's a lot that's done probably better. It's just as a story that I'd want to revisit, probably not. Yeah. So yeah. While the issue itself is probably stronger than the first 4, I'd probably be more interested in going back and re-looking at those first four again. We said we'd also talk about Battlefiles. So this was a 3-issue special that is promoted actually in the back of issue 5. So it started coming out about that same time, and it was divided into issue 1 looking at the Joes, issue 2 looking at Cobra, and issue 3 looking at the weapons and tech and vehicles. And was collected all together in a trade paperback. And it's interesting to speculate perhaps on why this came out. And I've got some thoughts on it. I think it's probably that the G.I. Joe book was so successful, and I think they just wanted to get more product out there. And so this was a relatively simple exercise to do, because what they're doing in terms of the words is they're very much leaning into the file card detail for each figure and some of the comic book content. So someone with access to the file cards information and a good passing knowledge of the comics and ability to kind of flesh it out a little bit more with some wording around it would be able to put together most of that the text relatively quickly. And they farmed out the art to a total of 22 artists, so with each artist doing just a few pieces each, again relatively probably quite a quick process to get all of that art done and in terms of sort of filling this gap and meeting a need. They're going for this sort of nostalgic G.I. Joe audience of lapsed, either lapsed readers or, readers without content that they could actually read in those sort of 5 or so years since the end of the Marvel run. So it's a way of familiarizing people with these Joes that they might not have seen or been thinking so hard about for a number of years, giving a bit of a solo spotlight for each one in terms of reminding them what they're all about, what their characters are about, and also giving a little bit of a spotlight on the updated designs of some of these guys as well, where again you can't have just as you can't have an individual story about each of these these characters where you can find out about all of their backstory. You can't necessarily have a splash page for them either, where you can really sort of show off a big splashy full page picture of their whole outfit and the redesign. So it's kind of meeting those various needs of, let's get some product out there, let's reintroduce these guys and sort of show off some of that new design, and let's give a tool to remind lapsed readers of who these characters are and what they're all about.
I agree with all that. Also worth noting, each of these is double-sized. Each of these is 48 pages and square bound, and the regular Joe issues are 24 pages. These are $5.95, so double the price. And I have to believe these are less expensive to produce, because hiring someone to draw a pinup with no background is less than hiring them to draw a page. So adding to this idea, Mark, of getting product out there, this is about making money. These 3 issues were each $6 cover price, and there's nothing on the back cover. So no artist was hired to create a piece of art that would go on the back cover. And for that matter, the designer didn't even reuse some art from inside or from a previous issue.
Should we have a quick look at some of these covers? Let's not go too crazy on it, but we've got a Joe cover, a Cobra cover, and weapons and tech cover, plus a collected cover as well.
I'll reiterate my point that David Michael Beck has a strong sense of light, and I don't know what technique he's using. I think there might be a lot of colored pencil in how he's painting, but issue 1 very clearly daytime. Issue 2 there's some really nice sort of low ambient light behind them, and then a modest yellow light source on the left, and then the final one, it's a gorgeous red yellow sunset. There's something in his technique, and I don't know sort of how it happens from paint and colored pencil, where all of his textures look dry to me. And this is a contrast from, say, Dave Dorman, who painted a lot of G.I. Joe art inside of Hasbro and also, Star Wars covers for books and comic books. Dave Dorman's textures are often silky, and I mean that both sort of skin and rocks and metal on tanks and clothing. David Michael Beck's textures are very dry, which it's just very different, and it's not something we see with painted GI Joe art.
Okay, interesting. And I think what I'll quite like to do is take a slightly different tack to this one. Is we're not going to go all the way through and look at all of the details, but kind of what was your feeling about these? And I think our approach to reading this kind of got to a similar place where we probably started reading through quite a lot of detail and flicking through, but kind of running out of energy and maybe not especially digging or getting excited by the content too much. And so I was flicking through through the pages, looking at some of the biogs that sort of caught my eye, but mostly just taking a look at the figure designs and looking at some of the different art styles and the artists that were there, and doing that for issue 1 and 2, but being left entirely cold by issue 3, which is quite a different tone to it. I don't think they were credited artists in issue 3 to the extent that they were in issues 1 and 2, and I got the impression that they're almost recycling Hasbro art that was already available. So
There are credited artists in issue 3, but yes, they do reuse some previously made or then contemporary Hasbro toy packaging art. Jay, you start. What's your overall feeling about this 3-issue miniseries?
Well, you mentioned that they were $5.95 a piece. The cynic in me says that it's a money grab, but I think that they do work for what they're intended to be. The property was gone for 7 years. And, obviously they're not using in the new series, they're not going to use all of the characters and all of the things like there were. And I don't know, I haven't read any further than where we are now. So I don't know for sure if we're not using some of these characters, but, my guess is we're probably not going to see things like Toxo Vipers, and the dinosaur hunters, whatever they were. So this kind of gives you a recap, and maybe a reintroduction of some of the characters that we haven't seen yet, and kind of reminding people like, hey, look, G.I. Joe also has this guy Airtight, and Barbecue, who we haven't seen. So, in that respect, it works. Some of the drawings are a little better than others. I like most of Mike Norton's drawings. I don't really care for most of the ones that Blaylock did. A lot of it goes back to just the redesign of the characters. And we talked about this earlier with just too much stuff, too many seams and ribbing and padding and stuff. And this gives you a chance to really look at some of the redesigns in full and, another opportunity to say either, yes, I like that, or no, I don't like that. One of the ones that stands out to me that I really don't like at all, and he's right on the cover of this issue, is Spirit. I understand they might not have wanted to use the original Spirit outfit because, whatever, racial appropriation, whatever they want to call it. He looks too much like an Indian. I mean, he is an Indian, and by that, obviously, a Native American. But this outfit is like, I don't know, that he almost looks like he's Snake Eyes' partner or something. He could very easily just have a Snake Eyes outfit on, but is no mask, and I don't think that that's the best look for Spirit. And then you have some of the others. Beachhead, on the cover is just kind of plain. Lady J, when I came to her page, I thought that was Scarlet at first, with the quiver on her back and the gun that almost looks like a crossbow. So a lot of the redesigns just don't work for me.
it was an interesting point you said about Spirit, that not connecting with you, because I think at the time that was one of the best received redesigns, that people said that his original was maybe not particularly politically correct, and it was overdue a redesign. And
really,
a lot of people really did like that Spirit, and it resulted in it being used as the basis for, I think, a number of figures actually. But yeah, certainly at least one.
What do you think, Tim?
I completely agree with you, Jay. And I felt that way when this at the time, because I think I bought issue 1 of Battlefiles at the time and then realized it wasn't for me. But from the cover to his interior, the thing actually two things stick out to me in issues 1 and 2. First, I think everyone does a good enough job. I don't think any of the drawings are bad, and some of the ones that I don't think I would like, I actually like. I actually like all of Blaylock's drawings. I think where he is slightly flattening and cartooning these characters, where he is simplifying, that actually is taking out some of these bits in detail
They're not terrible.
in a satisfying way. In issue 2, Mike Zeck draws about 3, and Dave Johnson draws a couple. And subtly...
Mark Brooks as well.
Yes, and Mark Brooks, his stuff back then was more exaggerated and a little caricature-ish in his proportions. He hadn't grown into the artist that he became later. But the Zeck ones, out of nostalgia and because of his very subtly like gorgeous inking, and the Dave Johnson ones from his like utter control over line and his sort of combination of flatness and dimensionality. Subtly, those two make the rest of them pale in comparison. And I remember thinking that at the time, that like Zeck is so affiliated with this brand from his run of covers from the Marvel years, that putting him in here just a little bit is such an unfortunate tease. And then having someone of Dave Johnson's caliber, and he was already good then. He became tremendous a few years later. The other thing that jumps out at me is that so many of these profiles take a couple words to denote that or when a Joe codename came into existence. So, for example, before joining G.I. Joe, Brad's nickname among his pilot friends in the Air Force was Ace. Taking the name Airtight, Kurt ... Choosing the codename Beachhead, Wayne accepted an offer ... Sorry, I don't like that. That could be an interesting story. I think some of it is that it gets repetitive because sort of every other Joe, there's a phrase like that, in the same way that the final paragraph of every Joe and Cobra profile is the same, which is like, then we did issues 1 through 4 and this Joe came back. Or then we did issues 1 through 4 and this Cobra kind of came back, but we didn't see them very much. So from a writing perspective, it's like that 7-year jump. In theory, I love the idea of sort of learning when or that these characters chose a code name or got saddled with one. When I'm actually reading sort of a half-baked sentence about it, it just sticks out oddly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the words used on these biogs is generally quite flat. You get something to do with their file card being expanded. A couple of references maybe to what happened in the original run, and then a couple of sentences about what has happened in the first 4 issues, and possibly some of the alluding to what might have happened in the gap as well. Yeah, and talking about what happened in the gap, what they've done, particularly on the Joes since leaving G.I. Joe. It's just quite formulaic and not particularly exciting. And what struck me actually about the Joes is that generally they've done well since leaving G.I. Joe. They've been pretty successful in their careers and doing interesting things, and probably be much more financially rewarded. So clearly they're just alluding to the fact that just as we as fanboys are nostalgic for the G.I. Joe property and it's come back, so we'd obviously want to buy it. The G.I. Joes themselves must be nostalgic and want to drop what they were doing in their successful careers at the first opportunities, and also come back to it on their on their not especially advantageous military pay.
I was kind of surprised by Roadblock's bio that said that he had a cooking show or something, I think, and produced a series of books and was like a well-known chef. I mean, that'd be like Emeril Lagasse going back and joining the Joes after doing, being drafted to the military for 2 years before he became a chef. I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know about that. But like you said, would he really give all that up to go put his life in danger? I don't know.
Something else that jumps out at me from these profile books with 2020 hindsight is that some of these artists later on would become a little bit more affiliated with G.I. Joe. So, for example, Joe Benitez draws a couple of the Cobra profiles, and later on he draws issue 20 of what's the IDW series? He did that later silent issue with Snake Eyes.
Yeah.
Origins.
Thank you. Draws issue, is it 20 of G.I. Joe Origins?
It was 21. It was a silent issue.
Okay, of course.
He does well. He does well here. He's got the Snow Serpent and Baroness and Destro. I think his is some of the best work in the book, to be honest, from my perspective.
And then Dave Johnson did some designs, some animation designs, which were not used a couple years later. And Dan Jorgens draws about 3 of the Cobra profiles, and he draws the first frontline arc for Devil's Due that's coming up. And Mark Brooks, I think, has done a couple variant covers for IDW. So as a time capsule,
Dave Johnson did a lot of the IDW covers as well.
That's true. I've heard that those had been drawn previously, and that IDW did not commission those at the time for those issues, but I could be wrong.
Interesting.
And I don't know if Hasbro had commissioned them or an earlier licensor had commissioned them. The final issue, issue 3, has these vehicles, and I'm really struck whenever I'm reading credits and not an artist, but a team or studio or collective is credited. And so in issue 3, with all these Joe and Cobra vehicles, there are 7 artists, right? One of whom is Tim Seeley, who's going to be drawing some of the G.I. Joe material from Devil's Due coming up. And then the final credited, quote, artist is Wham Entertainment, WAM. And when I saw that, I immediately thought, who's that? And then I turn the page, and the first image that I see is the G.I. Joe Brawler, which is, sort of a Humvee and heavy duties on the side. And I look at this and I think, oh, that's definitely some package art that Hasbro put on a toy around 2003 that I was ignoring. And Wham Entertainment was a studio founded by Walter McDaniel, who started working at Continuity Associates for Neil Adams, the ad agency, or the illustration house ad agency. And he drew Deathlock for Marvel. Walter McDaniel did. He drew some Deathlock for Marvel. This is not to be confused with Scott McDaniel, different person, different artist. And then Wham Entertainment did work for G.I. Joe and Transformers and Jurassic Park 3 and Men in Black 2 for Hasbro and Kenner. And this is the era when the toys have very comic book looking art on them, both for the figures and for the vehicles. So I haven't picked out precisely which of these pieces in issue 3 of Battlefiles is reused art that Hasbro already had, but I can sort of take a guess. And then again, going back to a point I made earlier, Devil's Due really has to contend with an uneven era in G.I. Joe design. Some of the characters and vehicles are unchanged from the 80s and 90s. Some of them have really modest updates. Some of them are all new vehicles, which don't really agree with the design ethos of Real American Hero up through 1994. And then some of them may sort of agree, but they've got, unappealing color schemes. So issue 3, the drawings are all overcolored. A drawing of a gun and a sword and a battle suit is sort of silly to me. But where they're sort of revisiting what G.I. Joe Order of Battle did in 86, 87, this 4-issue miniseries published by Marvel, where everyone gets a profile and all the vehicles get a profile. Certainly there was going to have to be an issue with vehicles.
I think that this number 3 is much less successful than numbers 1 and 2. The biggest reason is because the most of the images of these vehicles they're like in action shots. It's like you mentioned the Brawler from the very first page. that could be a panel out of a comic book. Okay, yeah, it's exciting. It shows somebody on the vehicle. They're firing weapons. Doesn't give you a really good look at the vehicle, though. Flip a few pages forward. There's the Phantom is really dark. You can't see hardly any detail on that. The G.I. Joe Assault Quad on the next page, again, is really dark. You don't get to see a lot of the detail. I think if you're doing something like an order of battle, it should almost be not necessarily as dry as the blueprints are, but you should be able to see a good side view and maybe even a side and a front view of a vehicle so that you can really get a good look at it. When I was a kid, I loved those order of battles because you did get a good look at things like that, and you could look at those and draw from it much more easily than you could the comic, because in the comic, just like with a lot of these panels, the vehicle is shown in story, it's in action. You're not going to get a real good look at it. But those order of battles gave you the opportunity to look at all the details of something that you might not have, and really see how it's built and how it's put together. And these just, you don't get that at all.
Were there any little details or things that sort of stuck out for you? That I'll start with one that on the Mutton Junkyard panel, we did get a little bit of storytelling or new news potentially, that we had Junkyard 2 as the dog. So this is moving on, and Junkyard 1 is an old pooch and has gone to live on the farm. And Junkyard 2 is his replacement. So a little bit of insight into the characters there that actually is something newly introduced in the book.
I don't think I like that. And it's kind of similar to when you guys were talking about the ARAH issues, and it's been mentioned a couple times that the timber that we see now is actually the third timber. And I kind of agree with what Tim said in an earlier episode, that we don't want to see these characters age. I liked, not that he had a whole lot of personality, probably, but, in the cartoon, Timber had a little personality. He wasn't quite Polly, but, he was there and he was a loyal companion to Snake Eyes, and you like that one. I don't want to think of, oh, this is the third Timber because the original one died, or this is the second Mutt or Junkyard because, the original one's been shipped off to some farm because he needed a hip replacement. Keep those iconic characters. We don't want I guess we don't want the pets to age, but they are going to age. But
they're making a big point of this time moving on and the characters aging, and particularly the pets aging. But is it necessary? Does it really add anything, or would we really just be equally as happy just it being a mutton junkyard?
I noticed.
Tim?
Yeah, I noticed that on Duke's profile page, there's an Eric Wolf Hansen drawing of Duke in his black suit, which matches how we see him in the first issue. And then there is what is definitely an Eric Wolf Hansen drawing on the bottom of the page of Duke in his 1983 yellow shirt costume. And this drawing doesn't match any panel from issue 5. And I don't know if it's a little bit of a tryout or some art that was unused from some other something, but it's such a tease because I want Duke in his regular costume in issue 5, at least for part of it. And here's an actual drawing of Duke in his regular costume, drawn by the guy who drew issue 5. And and then it's the only page in the entire book where someone gets a second drawing besides the full body shot of them. So in a second way,
that's on the same page as the Duke profile.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the trade paperback version of this, and it's just got the one full page.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
I'll Duke, so I don't have it. I don't actually have that one in the copy that I've got. Which so they've clearly made a decision for the reprint not to do that.
Interesting. Yeah.
If that paperback version, Mark, has the credits page for number 5, the image that Tim's talking about is the same image that they use for Duke on the credits page where it gives you the little recap of,
All right.
where he's been. And that's where, I don't know if that's where originally that image came from, but that's definitely where we've seen it before is on the recap page for number 5.
The inside front cover of issue 5 has a cropped headshot of Duke, and pulled out we can see his head, his arm, and some of his torso on this page in Battlefiles number 1. But it's a tease because the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, right, which is what sort of kicked off all of this, DC Who's Who.
Those were great.
DC Who's Who and G.I. Joe Order of Battle and Transformers Universe and G.I. Joe Battlefiles, those all had a single sort of profile shot. I don't mean like side view, I mean in general, of a character, and then a few panels from comics appearances in addition to all this text. And I'd like a little more from the visuals in Battlefiles. Clearly they're going for a tech look as compared to the original 1986 G.I. Joe Order of Battle, which is basically not even designed. I mean, they had a designer, but it's so bare bones. It's just, the sort of the dossier shape of that little tab with a rounded edge. And here you've got the green grid, and you've got under each person's name sort of a slightly abstracted silhouette of a weapon, and then some so the interstitial pages with like a close-up of the American flag. So it's a handsome package. I don't love the font for the words Battlefiles on the cover, which looks, the sharp edges sort of look like swords. I feel like that font should be reserved for like Ninja Force or Ninja Files. I feel like this wants to be a military stencil font, the way that it says the Joes on the bottom of issue 1 or Cobra on the bottom of issue 2, the covers. But I like that they are at least choosing to aggressively design this 3-issue miniseries. But then the back covers are a disappointment, because you turn and then you've just got this blank, black, nothing with the Hasbro logo and a barcode.
Yeah, I think the interior pages are probably over-designed. And I agree. I think that a lot of that page space could have been used to give more detail or text or images. I mentioned you mentioned the Marvel Universe and the DC Who's, and those were really great. I mean, that was what got me interested in reading Marvel comics to begin with, because I was a G.I. Joe fan and I read G.I. Joe and really didn't read any Marvel comics until I started hanging around with another kid that had a lot of the X-Men comics. And when I went to his house, those were the things I read, was the Marvel Universe. Because you would have 3 or 4 pages of background for a character, and there'd be important panels here and there, and it really filled in the gaps for you and gave you a better taste of what you could expect if you were to pick up a new issue, or if you wanted to try to track down back issues.
Yep. So that was the Battle Files. I think we'll have to wrap it up there before I get killed for not making dinner. But yeah, interesting if nothing else, sort of look at some of those characters and sort of just the diversity of the different artists. I think was, for me, the most interesting thing to see. Seeing that Mike Zeckard, the Joe Benitez, the Dave Johnson, just some interesting different takes from it. And as you search on the internet for those individual characters, you'll still, a lot of those images will be the ones that come up for them. Any final thoughts before we move on, guys?
What's the cover for the collection, Mark? I don't have the collection.
It's a bit more of an action shot. It's got Flint and Scarlet down in the front with, I think, Rock and Roll and behind them, and they've got kind of rocky scene behind them with some Vipers up on the top of the cliff face with a hiss tank sort of shooting down on them, and a sort of ghostly Mufasa type in the clouds image of Cobra Commander in there in the background. So it's quite an interesting image, and Flint there is doing quite a caricatured kind of shouty thing there with his face. But
I don't think I've ever seen that one either. Interesting.
Jay, how do you feel about the texture of the covers? It's that matte stock?
I don't know. I feel like, and this is kind of goes back to being over-designed. I think that a lot of this stuff is just overproduced, and maybe the thick cover is their justification for the $5.95 price point. But, as a kid, I remember buying the original comics. When I started buying them, they were 60 cents a piece. I think the Order of Battles were, without looking at them right here, maybe $1. Which was a bit more, so you did feel like you were getting a little more bang for your buck, but it still wasn't outside of, the realm of affordability for a kid. And when they jumped comics to, $3.95 and especially $4.95 for a lot of them, I think that just takes it out of the realm of kids being able to get them.
A larger topic of conversation for another day.
Yeah, that's a big topic point to lay down. As we're getting this far into the show, Jay, we'll have to pick that one up another time. Okay, so with the comic talk all done, we can move on to the quiz called Devil's True or Devil's Poo, where I talk about some facts and Tim and Jay have to decide whether they are true or poo. So here we go.
Devil's true, 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 or poo, poo, poo is all I want to know right now. True, 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 or poo, poo, poo. Let's find out the answers right now.
I'll start with you. This one for you, Jay. Devil's Due turned down Robert Kirkman of Walking Dead fame. They turned down a pitch for a G.I. Joe Zombies story.
Wow, I don't know. Still feeling that sting of getting the last couple wrong on our last episode. I'm gonna say poo, though. Am I wrong again?
It is indeed poo. I'm sighing because I don't like it when I can't get one past you. I do get a sense of satisfaction of being able to deceive you. So there is a nugget of truth in this, that Robert Kirkman did pitch a story to the Devil's Due for G.I. Joe, but this was a story about Destro's moon base. And I just didn't think it quite fit with the tone that they were going with. So yep, it did pitch and it was turned down, but it was not G.I. Joe Zombies.
That's funny because we did get a moon story later in the IDW run.
We did indeed, yeah, absolutely. that moon-based story did come about eventually, but not from Kirkman. Tim, Blaylock had developed the idea of Kamakura when he was still a kid and was determined to use him in the book as a star character.
Oh, this is tough because he's a bigger Transformers fan than a G.I. Joe fan, so I wonder how much time he would have spent coming up with new G.I. Joe characters as a kid.
He'd started off as a Transformers fan, but then changed to his allegiances to G.I. Joe. So,
okay.
So he was still a G.I. Joe fan.
I'm going to say true.
It seems entirely plausible, but it is poo. This one's false.
Rats.
So Blaylock describes Kamakura as a bit of a throwaway idea, and the fan reception to it was unexpected, and that kind of drove the ongoing use and particularly making him a toy and so on.
Yeah, I still think they could have thrown him away.
Josh Blaylock actually likens him to Boba Fett in Star Wars, where he was, just this character who was in the background of a scene and sort of grew with the fan response to it. Jay, one for you. Devil's Due included Neo Vipers as Hasbro insisted that they play a major part in the book.
I'm going to say poo, and I think that's probably the other way around. We talked about Hasbro getting some of these issues for reference when they made the first movie, and I think the Neo Vipers were featured in there, and they probably got that idea along with the nanites and many other things from this series.
Yeah, I think that's probably completely plausible. It is false, yes, as it is poo, just as you say.
All right.
The Devil's Due did not have new toys forced on them to be used in the book. Where they were used, it was generally just to show goodwill and to try and show Hasbro that they're doing their best to support the brand. Okay, next one. Hasbro had some strange rules on what could be included on covers, such as not allowing the guns to be pointed at the reader.
This is tough because that was a rule for a while at during the Marvel run, and then it got rescinded. I think around '88. But by the time Devil's Due was publishing, different people would be in charge. And I'm thinking of Devil's Due covers, and I can't imagine any that have guns pointed out. So I'm gonna say true.
True, it's true. They were not allowed to point their guns at the reader, and also minimal gunfire on the covers as well. So we can maybe try and spot if there's a theme there. But yeah, if we've seen guns pointed away from the reader with minimal gunfire, then that will be part of the Hasbro edict. Next up, Devil's Due wanted to kill Hawk and Cobra Commander, but weren't allowed.
True.
That is true. They did want to kill both of those characters and weren't allowed. And they still weren't allowed even when they were coming to the end of the run. So even in the final few issues of the Devil's Due run, they were not allowed to kill off those characters. And so the characters that were killed off in the run were chosen instead to show some of that, impact. Okay, Tim, this is last one for you. Devil's Due published more G.I. Joe issues during their tenure with the license than Marvel did.
Okay, so 155 plus 30 is 180 plus about 20 for the 4-issue miniseries. We're up to about 200. Devil's Due did the main series got to was it 42? Reloaded was like about 20. There was Master and Apprentice 1 and 2, Battlefiles, and then America's Elite got up to about
36.
Yeah. False.
Yeah, I think it's a false one. Yeah, they weren't far off, and they had a lot of they had a much shorter tenure in terms of the time than Marvel did. So they put out a more frequent content in the time that they had, but they didn't get up to the grand total. Yeah, so Devil's Due had 43 in the main series, 36 in America's relaunch, 18 on Frontline, and some various other tie-in books and miniseries. And so we're getting up to around about 180 as the total, whereas Marvel had their 155 main series, 28 special missions, various yearbooks, and other spin-offs. So they do have that. It did put out more, but given the amount of time they had for it, the totals aren't too far off. So that's it. That is all of my poo and true used up.
Mark's all out of poo.
But next, I think, Jay, you wanted to talk some toys.
Jay is here with a toy no fear, talking G.I. Joe collectibles. It's a favorite figure, let's pull the trigger, 3 3/4 inch or bigger. Jay.
Yeah, one thing I always liked when you would do Mark Talk Toys is you usually talk about a character that was featured in the issue. Last time we talked about classified Destro and compared that with the 1983 Destro. Now, of course, this issue only had 2 characters, and since one of them doesn't have a classified figure yet, that's Major Blood, that leaves us with Duke. Now, Duke was first released as a mail-away figure in 1983, and as a carded figure in 1984. His first appearance in the Marvel comic was number 22, like Chimney Sweepers Come to Dust by Larry Hama and Mike Vosberg, when he and Roadblock took down a Rattler that was preparing to attack the funeral of the team's field commander, or the first commander, General Flag. Now, if you remember in the beginning of the episode, Flag was killed by Major Blood in issue 19. So there's a nice little tie-in there, really, with Duke being the one that goes after Blood. I did have some info from his file card, but since I know you're in a hurry, I'm not going to go into too much of that. The big thing was, and I thought was nice in this issue, they, he was fluent in Russian. It was noted when he was in that party. Languages is a big specialty of Duke. Back from his earliest file card, he says he's fluent in French, German, and English when he enlisted in '67. And then after that, he went to U.S. Army Special Language School, studied Han Chinese and Southeast Asian dialects. So probably by the time we meet the character in 1983, he's proficient in a lot of different languages. Now, after his first appearance in issue 22, he was featured pretty prominently in the series, but I think probably what leads to the character's biggest popularity is his use in the cartoon, the Sunbow cartoon. He was in almost every issue, probably of the first, or every episode of the first series, where he was often portrayed as the leader of the team. And I think since then he's appeared in every incarnation of any Joe comic and in cartoons or toys, and obviously was the main character in the Rise of Cobra movie. Now, according to yojo.com, there have been over 50 different versions of the action figure. Like I said, the only ones that we're going to look at right now are the original and the classified one. Now, one of the most distinguishing characteristics of Duke's original design was the bandolier that went across his chest. The original 1983 version featured one grenade at the top. The new one doesn't have the grenade. It does have the little blue spot on the top of the strap that I think everybody kind of agrees is some kind of communicator device. Both versions have, which is a nice little touch, an airborne pin that he wears on his left breast. And similarities with the figures. The original Duke had a tan button-up shirt. This one does too. Green pants, same thing. This one, like the other classified figures, has the gold accents. Of course, the original one didn't have that. There's a couple nice little things. The original figure had a pair of black binoculars on a strap that came with him. And the new Duke has kind of an updated, more modern, I'm not sure if you'd call it binoculars, because I think it only has one. It's like a night vision monocular, maybe. And I actually have a pair of one of those myself, and that's kind of a neat little thing. And it's next, yeah, it doesn't look exactly like this, but it works great for night vision. We watch animals in the backyard.
That's another podcast in itself again.
But yeah, and that fits on his belt. The original Duke had a backpack that had a parachute on it, and a shovel, presumably to bury the parachute when he would go on night insertions. The new backpack also has the shovel in there, so that's a nice touch. The only thing that I really am not real pleased with the new character is his face just looks really young. If you look at the original Duke, it said that he enlisted in 1967, which would have put him about 34, probably, if you do the math. He would have been born in like 48 or 49. Would have been about 34 when he joined the G.I. Joe team. And the new figure looks like he's just out of college, or maybe just going into college. I understand why they do this. They want the characters to be a little younger. But to me, G.I. Joe is supposed to be the best of the best, and you don't get that right out of college. You get that after 10 or 15 years of experience in the field. But overall, I think the update is a really nice figure. It's a lot more accurate, or similar to the original, to make it older fans are able to appreciate a lot more than some of the ones that we've seen in the years between then and now.
I've actually seen you might have seen this as well, a customizer who sort of repainted his classified Duke to look like the original, and I think he sort of used some Sculpey as well to make a 6-inch version of his original gun as well, that rifle, and it did look very satisfying, actually, just seeing those colours replicated exactly on this scale, and with the new levels of detail. And I can see the desire to update them and stuff. It perhaps would have made for a really nice variant or something, just to have just that real classic version 1 look to it and colors and so on.
You mentioned a custom Duke. It's funny, when I was a kid, I always thought that his legs, the action figure's legs, were kind of skinny. And then another figure I had, Chuckles, with the Hawaiian shirt, I just thought was stupid. But his lower half, I thought looked really nice. So I took him apart and switched his legs and waist with Duke's, so that Duke had a bit more of a bulkier, sturdier look. And that was my personal figure.
Interesting. Tim, I can't remember if we talked about this before, but where do you stand on the classified line and so on? Have you does it appeal on any level to you?
Yeah, I have the first 4 or 5. I'm not a big toy collector these days because my attention goes to artwork and pre-production, but that's not just Hasbro, that's also animation and comics. But I follow the news when classified figures get announced and then sell out very quickly, to the disappointment of fans. And I know a little bit of the controversies. There are too many repaints, or the weapons are actually Nerf guns, and maybe some people don't like that. In my mind, quintessentially, G.I. Joe is a smaller size action figure, and 6 inches is just sort of too big for me. But if Hasbro is going to play the game, right, then G.I. Joe is going to compete with or stand on the same level as Star Wars Black and Transformers Red and Marvel Legends. So go for it. And it is exciting to see that much more detail and that many more accessories. And it's nice to see a Joe figure in a package that has such heft and takes up so much space on the shelf. It commands attention. But then the flip side is we can't have vehicles. And G.I. Joe is a vehicle-based line, right? We call it an action figure line, but if you look at that first year, that's a vehicle-based toy line. And I'd be happier if G.I. Joe were strong enough, like Star Wars, to have a line for grown-ups and a line for kids. But then, I guess going by this Star Wars analogy, maybe the G.I. Joe line for younger buyers, maybe they wouldn't bend at the elbows or knees, and I'm not ready to give that up.
No, we tried that back in... actually, did I think, well, the limited sort of articulation version of G.I. Joe that came out in 2001, 2002, was it, that was actually featured in Battle Lines with the stat frostbite design. Yeah, not very satisfying. I think it's sort of quite aligned to that. Was it Power of the Force version of the Star Wars, where they just were all very squared off and very over muscled and not really resonating with the people who like those original ones.
You mentioned the packaging of the classified line, Tim. Excuse me. And I think that's probably one big complaint I have about the line is they're in boxes. They've got plenty of room, but there's no file card. I mean, part of the reason why the line was so successful and why we all grew such an attachment to the characters was the file card. You were in the store, you could look at the package, look at the figure, flip it over, see what they're about. If you don't know who these characters are, it's just a guy in a box. I mean, you don't know anything about the character. I think they're really losing out on not including a file card with the new characters or with the new line.
So much of what actually gave them, say, the character, the personality. You could, take so much away from those file cards. Yeah, it's a shame. But the box art as well, they are putting some effort into that. And the G.I. Joe classified Duke, I think, featured Franco Francavilla. I might be pronouncing that wrong. But yeah, mixing it up with each one of these different figures having an interesting artist, and Hasbro not being afraid to have them take their own style and make an individual stamp on that art.
I don't know. I mean, for me, that doesn't work. That was another nice point about the original card art was they all had the nice Hector Greedo artwork. They all looked like they were done by the same person. They all belonged in the same universe. If you put several of these new classified boxes side by side, some of the figure artwork is a close up, some is is further back. They're very different styles in some cases, and I think a more uniform look would have been better. Not that we ever are finding these on the shelf, but just, I know a lot of people do display the boxes. I don't. I take them all out. But yeah, I would prefer more uniform, style to them all. That's me personally.
Having this different artists and having file cards is the opportunity, right? You'd have them draw something a little bit more uniform for the front, and then you'd have some kind of trading card on the back or in the box.
That'd be a good way to do it.
Where it's a pose where they get to do more what they want.
We haven't spoken about the latest retro line Duke, aka Shoutface Duke, which I think we can all agree we're not fans of, and move on. Why choose? Why, you're putting out a new toy. This is Duke. This is the one to get everyone behind the line. Why have him with a shouty face? Not needed.
There's so many other good Dukes that they could have used. I don't know why they went with that one. I don't know. Yeah, the retro versus classified line is a big issue. I think a lot of collectors are leaning more towards the classified figures now. I know I am, just because they're newer. They're new sculpts. They're bigger. You get a lot more detail, and it's just neat to see them in new sizes like this. And then with the retro line that we got with the most recent wave of Lady J, Duke, and Cobra Commander. The Cobra Commander's nice. Duke has the shouty face, which doesn't work. The Lady J figure, I felt like didn't work. Now I did get most of the figures. Actually, I got all of them from the first 2 or 3 waves of the retro figures, because some of them I didn't have in 3 3/4 scale before. But once they released those, and I kind of had decided a while ago that I wasn't going to try to get the vehicles. Just it's a matter of real estate. I don't have the room to display a bunch of vehicles. So that made leaning towards the classified line easier for me. But it's like, why would you use a bad design like that for one of your flagship characters? I don't know why.
And on that bombshell, Tim, have you got some G.I. Joe merchandise to tell us about?
I do.
So funky, so nice, it's G.I. Joe merchandise. Do you need it? Sure you do. It's G.I. Joe branded, fool. What shall we make? We can't decide. Pick some old crap and put Flint's face on the side. It's G.I. Joe merchandise.
I'm holding, and I'm flipping by my microphone, the 1983 Marvel Books G.I. Joe Real American Hero, the Trojan Gambit. This is the size of a coloring book. It has a spine, and the spine just says G.I. Joe. The cover, it's a gorgeous painting by Earl Norham, and it's a couple Joes in that signature Earl Norham painterly brushwork style. This book is a reprint of issues 6 and 7 and 3 of the monthly G.I. Joe comic. And this was sold at bookstores and Toys R Us. And it's not published technically by Marvel Comics. It's published by Marvel Books, which is Marvel Comics. And I think at the time, David Anthony Kraft was the editor in charge of Marvel Books, so I think he's the person who put this together. But I might be wrong on this. He might have been the editor in charge of Marvel Books a little bit later. But Marvel Books is this. I don't know enough about it, but and I haven't checked my David Anthony Kraft interview recently. But Marvel Books is this sort of brief run of publishing like coloring books and comics reprints in this slightly larger like coloring book size, right? The trim is taller and wider than a comic, for placement in bookstores. But this one is just 3 issues of the G.I. Joe comic. It's on really nice paper. It's not the Baxter paper of Tales of G.I. Joe, but it's not the newsprint of the then monthly G.I. Joe. What's really fun about this, besides the fact that it's a little bigger and it's got a spine, so it feels fancy, is that all 3 stories have been recolored. And that's because it was printed at a different size. And the original coloring for those issues by, I think, Christy Steele. Oh, that's wrong. The name is Christy Scheel, not Christy Steele. Those color guides are made for film and then plates at a certain size, and you can't just blow them up. Oh, or maybe you can, but it's expensive. Maybe it's only possible or faster, cheaper to just recolor them. So these 3 issues are recolored by Stan Goldberg. The other reason to all right, here's the better reason to recolor it, because this is going to be on better paper. So you don't want to use the screens for newsprint where you're going to sort of be able to see the dots. You want to have a fancier printing process for this nicer paper, for this nicer market. But what's fun is that, this is not like a case where with the occasional, Marvel or Dark Horse reprint of a superhero book or a Conan book, it's not modern coloring redoing old coloring. It's 4-color, right? FOUR, 4-color from 1983 being recolored as 4-color in 1983. And so I don't know if Goldberg had the original issues next to him and was making slightly different choices, or if he just had all the character guides, whatever that may have been, next to him. But there are just lots of subtle and interesting differences. Like, for example, the very first page of the book is the very first page of issue 6. And the original issue 6 has a plane taking off, and the background is this bright orange. And then the version that I'm holding, the background is red and orange and light orange and yellow. And then the actual credits and the indicia from the original printing have been removed. I wonder out there, are there, I got into G.I. Joe comics because of the toys. I wonder if there are people who got into the comics because they found one of these books at a bookstore or a toy store.
And as well as the recoloring, I think there's some re-editing and moving around of panels as well. There's some quite interesting examples of that over on IDW, where they've replaced images with others, or merged certain pages and panels together to compose the look of the page in a slightly different way alongside that recoloring.
One of the things that I loved that Marvel put out was the G.I. Joe Digest. Did you guys get those?
No, I don't think I've ever seen one in person even.
But do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it a smaller reprint?
Yeah, and it reprinted like 3 issues at a time.
It's technically called G.I. Joe Comics Magazine. Colloquially, everyone calls it G.I. Joe Digest.
Oh, okay.
Because it's digest size, like the Archie digests at the cash register. Yeah,
those were great because, like I mentioned in a previous podcast, my first issue was number 18, and very shortly after that came out is when they started putting those out. And by getting those, I was able to then, at the newsstand, catch up on all the stuff that I had missed before number 18 came out.
Aha. Yeah, these each had 3 issues at a time. The front cover would be one of the 3 covers. The back cover would be another. Some of the issues have the 3rd cover then in black and white as the, I think, inside back cover. Issue 1 of G.I. Joe Digest has just issues 1 and 2 because issue 1 was double-sized. I never saw these at the time, but when I got into G.I. Joe comics, around when issue 90 was published, I did see these available for sale through mail order and at comic book stores as sort of a back issue. They're really satisfying because the art is the way that comics were, the sort of style of comics then, both drawing, inking, and coloring, is that you can shrink it that much and it still reads. It's a little hard. Yeah, but you see what happened.
Detailed like these ones.
Yeah, you see what happens. Marvel and Dreamwave experimented in the 90s and 2000s with publishing modern comics at a smaller digest size to sort of like aim them at kids, maybe sell them at stores that weren't comic book stores. And the more detailed the art, the more busy the color, particularly if it's meant to be printed on glossy paper, and then the digest is not glossy paper. I'm thinking of the Dreamwave John Nay Reiber Jay Lee Transformers G.I. Joe crossover that's set during World War II, which is bonkers, right? Imagine reading that at digest size on flat paper, not glossy paper. It is fascinating.
Interesting. A good fascinating or a bad fascinating?
Difficult. It's a really interesting artifact, but it's a little hard to read.
I liked it. I thought the series looked really nice, but it seemed I don't have it in front of me, but it, from what I remember, it seemed like most of the pages were pretty dark. So I could imagine shrinking it down to the digest size would be a challenging read, maybe.
And all of the dialogue balloons as well, sort of, and all of the captions and things, all of those shrinking as well, and you're just it's gonna strain your eyes to read them. If you know.
I'm gonna ask right now if there are any listeners or viewers on our various platforms, if you got into G.I. Joe comics in the 80s because of G.I. Joe Digest, these 3-in-1 very compact reprints. Let us know, because I'm interested to know who has a relationship with these, and did it work? Did they get people in?
I've tried to track those down. I was gonna give them to somebody as a gift, but they're hard to find.
One of the things about getting back to originally the Trojan Gambit, one of the interesting curiosities in that is, I think it's probably the title page. So I'm guessing the page after the cover. Or possibly the back cover, I'm not too sure because I don't have it in front of me, but is that they've taken the issue 4 cover, which originally had Hawk wearing a beret, and they've redone that with him without the beret and showing his original blonde crew cut, which sort of fixes a niggle that I had with that original cover.
It's always great when that kind of inaccuracy or small mistake can be fixed in a later edition, without making a big deal of it. You sort of nod and go, yeah.
Okay, very good. So let's move on to everyone's favorite segment. By everyone I mean mine. It's Innuen-Joe.
Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking Innuen-Joe.
If you are offended by words like
Sucking, flesh wound. Willy, Pete. Balls, crystal balls. Hypno shield.
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
Grandmother's brick in a Prada handbag.
So, as you know, if you aren't in the right frame of mind, my frame of mind, then G.I. Joe names can sound pretty dirty. So can I get through a list of 10 dirty sounding G.I. Joe names without making my co-hosts titter or indeed guffaw? So Jay and Tim, keep your mics on. I'll spot if you've muted there. And let's begin. Deep 6. Listen and Fun Tripwire. The Toss and Cross.
All right, you got me.
AKA the Bridge Layer.
You read a list of those on the last episode when it was just the two of you, and I think I was probably gone with the first one. I have to admit I have the same probably 12-year-old sense of humor that you do, Mark. So the names.
Thank you for thinking my humor is so advanced. So I think that's us all out of time, and hopefully by the time I've edited this down, we can get down to a sensible time.
You won't.
So with that done, you can join us next time on G.I. Joe. We're all up to date on our reading of IDW's A Real American Hero, so we're going to have a rest week, but we will be there. We've got some interesting ideas for a special episode, so keep watching the skies for that. And then in a fortnight's time, we will be back for the next arc, which I believe is issues 6 to 9. I think it's a 4-parter. 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that's 4 parts. And you can find us in all of the usual places. TalkingJoe.co.uk has got all of those usual places: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and YouTube. And where can people find you, Jay?
Just look for me on Facebook, either Jay Cordray or Break Room Sketches.
And Tim?
The best place to find me is arealamericanbook.com. But I'm also on Facebook and Instagram with that tag.
Very good. When all's said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes.
Ooh-ha. Laters.
Yes, get us out of this rabbit hole, Mark. I'm complaining about coloring in comics, and it'll be hours before I stop.
Did we lose Mark? Tim, are you there? Did we lose me?